Hello, guys, and welcome to that episode X series 2 I'm just review and panel of myself and Charlotte, and I have got some really say that some excellent. Oh,
It shows your personality, Daniel.
um, yeah, so we like to start us off on a bit of a somber, on a bit of a more somber note to start off with. I just want to send out a message of support to Mama. Mama, who was basically impaled on by the usual idiots a few years ago for um, on just expressing her opinions on of who and stuff that basic tool in this that a lot of us have actually um basically the stuff that a lot of us actually chat to each other about in various she's Facebook forums or live streams, etc. And even on uh, but just to want to say to know, not I read to if she or she's a similarity and 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 get and basically and I know that you had a hard time due to the aspect but like as as a thing you feel up to um um actually if any of us tell us no that is when and a bit of the and because share and kids are actually enjoyable and all the scary things and stuff like that. So when I and hashtag give it stand to with my now in so um is there anything you would do to add before we get into the fun and
Just that
stuff?
we're all worried because we've said this on quite a few of our streams. We made a family and we made a community through the the troubles and tribulations of the last few years with the show. So if you don't want to come in a stream or just if you don't want to be in a chat, which we all understand, just message one of us privately, just to say I'm doing okay or I'm healthy, I'm fine. Just do that if you can, Melina, because we really just want to know that we all understand we all have times when we just want to go offline, we just want to sort of break ourselves away from it. But just let us know privately if you can. Because we all love you. You're like a little fireball of passion and energy and we love that. So please get in contact if you can.
Yeah. So to start us off with, so to start us off with, talking about the finale, yeah, that this particular series, um, obviously, but just about Trevor up chatting about the second series. So shall we? So shall we? Um, are your thoughts on this episode before we jump into any story parts and thoughts and stuff? I thought that any uh, thoughts on this episode to your general thoughts?
I think watching it again, because like I said, I've watched all of these, but I watched it fresh for the streams. It struck me how, in comparison, this finale was very different to the last series. Like the last
Yeah,
series was very action packed. It was quite like pacey. It was like a proper chase. You felt like you almost had to catch your breath. Whereas
yeah,
this finale feels a lot more like it's sort of slowly like telling you a few points that we were still a bit didn't know about, and like it sort of has left purposely a few mysteries just to tell you at the end sort of an answer, which is interesting to go for a finale. It's definitely, I would say it's less, it's more sedate, I would say, as a finale almost, but there is still action, but it's
yeah,
a lot more explaining happens in this one.
yeah. Yeah, now with that, so we see it's a bit more sort of methodical when it's pacing, because like and comparison, obviously, there will be sort of brief comparisons to the previous finale throughout this review, but in terms of the pacing of the two finales, you've got the series one finale, which was an action based sort of else kill sort of confusion, but after as the patient's very hard killing Jared Jake and Jared Jake basically like it does have a bit of action when we come to the flashback scene towards the end of the until onto the end of the episode to when the flashback scene, but like this, but I could say that the first half of the episode's more of a slow on, I sort of start to um finale. Yeah, don't know what you uh, think about that,
Yeah,
Charlie.
I would say it's sort of, it's almost, it feels like a lot of character work happens in that first half.
Yeah,
Whether that's Denton, I love the Kate and Steve stuff in this episode. That those are some of my favourite parts actually,
yeah,
because it's sort of, you start to, I think in this episode you were seeing Kate and Steve were getting a lot more friendly, and they were sort of starting to become more of a team in this series. But I feel like in this episode, it sort of fully is showing by the end that they're best mates, that they've got each other's backs. And a lot of that happens in the first half, and then it's almost like the second half that gets left a bit because then we're fully concentrating on Denton. And like I said, the sort of last questions that were sort of left over are being sort of explored a bit and sort of given answers to.
yeah, yeah, and the story kind of picks up again the funeral, because if you remember, because if you remember, it's on its tribute past the rain in the previous episode, so like he started I read to yeah the funeral.
Yeah, and it's sort of, it's, we've sort of seen Steve be a bit more friendly towards Denton, haven't we?
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
this is like showing that he's going beyond just being sort of kind to her now.
Yep. And like my first impressions when I watched it for the first time was Arnold and just getting a bit sort of philosophy imagine
Well,
it to do
well, no, but that's also another
because
thing.
yeah, because I mean, um, and yeah, because Arnott's character was sort of mentioned, so like that as well, kind of sort of trips the audience and audience to
Oh,
go, oh no, he's
well,
doing it
no,
again.
it's sort of obviously
Yeah,
there's a reveal later, which we'll get to.
yeah,
But this is what I like about Line of Duty. It remembers what it's already established, and I think it's a very good show for remembering in past series what's happened. And it's without because we've had that first series of Steve, and we saw his sort of ways
yeah,
without having to explain anything. You sort of go, oh God, Steve, you're doing it again. Like, why are you doing this to yourself? Almost. That's sort of. I remember that was my first reaction when I watched it.
yeah.
So, like I said, I like that about Jed and this sort of series. He very much he seems to if he's put something purposefully about character, it always seems to come up again, which I like.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, and right away, and starts to put a foot in it. Because remember remember when on takes her home, she says, do you mind do you mind the phone is by your home and need to pick up mum and there's and oh, onions and I would rather go myself. So it kind of it so it kind of raises a few ambiguous because she's just um because she's just essentially but I done and um 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 also that's not the first thing you usually think about
Yeah,
and I
and all,
think
and we
in a
also
funeral.
knew how close she was. I think that's also what makes that start to go, what's going on in your head? Because it's like I
Yeah,
think anybody wouldn't that would like anybody's mum who was dealing with their mother dying after the funeral, their first thought wouldn't be that sort of practical almost and that sort of quick. You would expect them to be more sort of in the malaise of grief. But because we know how much she also like she remortgaged her house, she sold the house for to get her mum into that care home. So she's a very
yeah,
devoted daughter. She's very close with her mum. So I
yeah,
think that's also the bit that starts to make you go in that scene. Something's not right here. But before
yeah.
that, you have missed a scene with Manish
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
in
I forgot.
hospital.
And yeah, so and each gets my man each gets streamed by his students and stuff. But it's under but it's under the witness protection scheme. And so like the evidence that he can so the evidence that he confirms as a unit from being handed over to the prosecution. But yeah, so yeah, yeah, so he is still being student over it because he's still got the cooperate obviously. So
Yeah, but he says a few quite interesting things. He retracts the dying declaration, doesn't he?
yeah,
And he sort of says that I was panicking, I was close to death. You can't use it, and I don't stand by it.
yeah,
And he starts to talk about Tommy because that comes up later up in the episode. And he sort of they're starting to lay down little clues now. It felt like to me to
yeah.
why Tommy involved, how's Dryden involved, He's sort of starting to give you little pieces of the puzzle there.
Because if you remember, you saw this, remember you saw the after the previous press and conference earlier on in the series, and Jira, I didn't talk about moving and then for of a talking event us and like about mentioning army is name it kinda makes sense also a little early um and the whole sort of scheme with our visuals as a advice to sort of um and to sort of and to sort of can you
Yeah, that's because he sort of says it's to blackmail Dryden, doesn't he? But he
yeah
also has an interesting little bit, like this is the last thing he says, and he says outside parties wanted Tommy out the picture,
yeah
and that's when you start. So because we've never really gone into why the ambush happened at this point, we just know he was Tommy, so it would make sense. But we've never properly explored. So he's
yeah
starting to give a hint as to why Tommy had to die.
yeah
So that also comes up later. That's what I mean. This is it's such a small scene, isn't it? But there's
yeah
a lot of in the dialogue if you actually pay attention that it's sort of priming you or giving you little bits that are going to come very relevant later on.
yeah and yeah and maybe it's also yeah and it was also asked about the and he was also asked about the times certain officers um had can eat and Jerry away goes on to eat about the crimes in Jira. I I'm not actually gonna phrase it the way he's
No,
because of YouTube.
YouTube
But
wouldn't like us.
yeah, but you know what I mean. But then also it goes on to what about the whole incident with
Well, yeah,
the
and sort of like I said, this is just the first bit we get told,
yeah
isn't it? And then later on,
mhm,
when Denton becomes the focus, you learn a lot more about Carly and her place, and that
yeah
she wasn't so much of an innocent. That's all I'll say until we get to it.
yeah
So yeah, and then it's Denton with Steve in a house, and Steve's like sort of trying to get information out of her, but she's very quick to say, "I want to get my mum's things."
yeah. And and she's kind of kid or kidding eerie at the same time. So like, well, she's trying, and so she's trying and take over a tracks a bit by putting on the cross or kidding. Yes, I persistent about one from the bill on injustice. Well,
Yeah, she's fully playing the sympathy card, isn't she, with Steve?
I so uh, so and so and so and wake up back to the hospital and 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 he should mum and mum and he should asked and who is and who is and the it or it is Ruby is it but it is and undone with the concrete orange and he said that it wasn't um it was just someone thinking I don't that they had them dressed up and cherry sushi and you know this.
Yeah, and it's sort of, and this is a great scene for Sasha because he says it so offhandedly, doesn't he? When
Yeah,
he goes, "Oh, we just found another." I won't use the word that he used again because of YouTube, but
yeah,
he uses like a dude. He uses quite a not very nice term about this poor girl that basically got killed and used as a prop, and he sort of is very
yeah.
offhanded about that, and it's sort of Sasha does play it sort of cold almost, doesn't he?
Mhm.
In and but then also, so we've now got the revelation that Carly's not dead, that she's
Yeah.
alive somewhere, which is interesting in for this episode, and that sort of keeps coming up, doesn't it?
Yeah, uh, yeah, and so like, um, yeah, so like, and it's back to the and so again it's back to the
Oh
station.
no, Manish has got more to say. Going
Oh
through a note,
yeah,
but well, he talks about Acres, doesn't he? Which is
yeah,
the police officer that was in the car with Tommy,
yeah,
kind of saying she knew too much because it because you sort of forgot, like if you go back to that flashback, she was also
yeah.
shot. Like it wasn't just a hit on Tommy, was it?
What is a hatton is a hatton like a ability a bit with like and that I can and she and shut up keeping on hot on Angela
Yeah.
because
So
yeah, because I kind of wanted to use her as a escape or as an interpretation of it.
yeah, and it's then throughout the whole series, they purposely flip flopped, haven't they, on Denton being innocent or not, and how much does she know? Was she just sort of in the wrong place at the wrong time? And then the fact that the order he says we got ordered not to kill her sort of makes AC-12 go. So she was involved somehow, or she knew something, or why would you order to spare her?
Yeah,
Why didn't she get part of the kill list, basically, which sets sort of them going from last episode when they were like, she probably is innocent and we've sort of fitted her up almost, to no, actually, she is. There's something here. She knows more than she's saying.
yeah,
And he also finishes off with another sort of. Like I said, it's a very dense finale, this one, isn't it? Because
yeah,
we also have the caddy couldn't be brought back up.
yeah, but you can kind of see everything that and he's being brought being brought up by any of his fellow colleagues or tries to operates and
Well, that's later, isn't it? But in this one, in this
yeah,
scene, Manish says um,
yeah,
that Cole, his partner's not the caddy.
yeah,
So the sort of Dot's little trick of just naming him last episode is
mm-hmm,
already starting to come apart, isn't it?
mm-hmm.
So that's what makes him do what he does later on in the episode.
And yeah, I'm thinking that that's kind of one in the fall also last episode like that there's an enjoyable episode but you mean to tell me that not one of the other three so we kind of said hang on a minute why And I is also the element to put the blame on to no and then free Eve sister
Well, I
sister
think Ted is, isn't
what
he? He shows a bit of that in the episode. He sort of says like, "You need to carry on like investigating this,"
yeah
and I think maybe that's a bit of Ted sort of thinking. Maybe he's not knowingly thinking it, sort of going, "Yeah, something doesn't fit here."
yeah
And the other two, to be fair, they're sort of the caddy was sort of mentioned like once in their investigation of Tommy. So it's sort of a
yeah
side thing to them, and like Dot has been given that case, so that's what's helping him, I think, a bit in that regard. If I were to sort of argue against what you said, that the other two have got
yeah
this big case they're working on, and Ted has purposely said to Dot, like, you deal with this.
yeah
Like I said, you might feel like that, but that could come up later on because obviously we know, if you know this episode, the caddy stuff is gonna be brought up again next series. That's all I'll say.
yeah and yeah so he and you and yeah and so he's also and oxen on the and to go up and back to the and to go up and back to the wall up from morning investigation on egg and are in the kitchen and stuff the no
Yeah,
was
that comes up later as well, doesn't it? That sort of
yeah
said at the beginning and it comes back up.
yeah the but yeah I know I think and about the scene is a kind as the for action in hard get leaves and he comes back up again kiss hard to get it says Jira I in was the best or survivor and however hard so to time passes ancient to the Luca Alec
Yeah, and that was always
and
going to be an issue with going after Dryden, wasn't it? That they're going
yeah
after somebody who's going to have mates, who's going to be well liked by some in the force.
yeah
So that's sort of why you could see, like in the previous episodes, they were so careful
yeah
investigating and getting as much evidence as possible because they knew if they didn't have enough evidence, they would get this reaction and they would probably be seen as sort of they just like almost like a personal vendetta against Dryden, which they had to make it look like there was plenty of evidence against him, but you could tell he was a big sort of personality and person in the force.
um,
Yeah, but now we have Denton going back
oh,
into ep12.
oh yeah she did I can get it for a night and then I'll give you a bit this time is but this time is on this so a kappa and what it appears to be to the audience as on the sun as of it almost
Yeah,
and
or like moral support.
yeah,
I got more of that vibe than a rep. He's sort of there to hold a
yeah,
hand almost.
mhm,
But because like if the questions ever get too close, he sort of tries to almost back them off, doesn't he, for her in this
yeah,
scene? Which is like
yeah,
you've added that to being at the funeral, like being around a house a lot in previous episodes. You can see that he's getting close,
yeah,
so it sort of adds to all of that.
yeah. Uh, um, so, yeah, and so she's, yeah, so, and she's sort of stood over the right of the arm, then right of the arm, ish, um, right of the arm, pushing about the track, and, um, and awful. Like that, and she's like at this point, she's almost kind of a shift, and she is almost kind of shift. They basically because they know that the tracker being moved on, like Oscar,
Yeah, the
rather
forensic,
and it
isn't
being
it?
originally based on yeah, because because it had to be moved, and Hastings almost put his foot on it um, by asking, um, was it you that moved the chair? I can't, and she said, you're not, and you're not guilty, authorized, and asked that question.
Yeah, and like this is Denton. Like we've seen her multiple times now, sort of, not sort of have this cool demeanor, doesn't she? And the sort of I know
Yeah,
I'm smarter than you and I can answer you back. And you can
yeah,
see at first when the tracker's brought up, she's
yeah,
very quick to dismiss it. But as soon as they go, well, we've got forensics that
yeah,
prove that this was on your car, and then it got transferred onto Acre's car,
yeah,
then you sort of see that facade start to shatter a bit, don't you? Because you can
yeah,
think she's thinking, oh God, how do I answer this? And then it's not just the car, there's another bit of evidence, isn't there? That makes her once
yeah,
again look very guilty.
yeah, yeah, and that was, yeah, and that was, like, no, wasn't the bribe, was it? Because that comes, because that comes, later on in the
No,
letter.
it's actually it backs up Dryden's account of her stalking him
Oh,
because
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, because she was, yeah, because she was, instead of I didn't call, we were having an answer. So, like, she saw the whole thing, like, Dryden, talking about his, like, Aaron, like, she saw Carl, like, assault. You did the trains.
yeah, but at this point they just sort of they see the CCTV of her coming out of the city hall, don't they?
Yeah,
Like a couple of minutes after Dryden and Carly.
yeah,
So they sort of say like, well, you claimed you didn't follow him, and like the stalking angle was made up by Dryden, but you were following him. Like that shows that that was a lie.
yeah,
And then they sort of then say, then is that why you picked Carly? Like out of all the missing persons you could have picked,
yeah,
you happened to pick her. And now they sort of saying, well, we know why you picked her because you saw her, and she denies like seeing Carly and even being there.
yeah,
But it's like, oh, there's so much evidence you can't, and that's what I mean. Sort of once again, you see this interview start with her being quite cool and collected, and then as these two bits of evidence get presented, you sort of see her go, oh God, like almost if you could read her mind.
yeah. Because she kind of puts the break into of the Palermo and so that she can study get the poem
Yeah, and you
was
once again we have a ghost thing again, don't we? Like she saw no, it was Gates. Or last series we had Gates see Lavity, like a sort of almost ghost sort of
yeah,
thing. And then in this scene, she sees Carly without that. And what I like about this is that they don't explain it yet. So you just
yeah,
you sort of see her in the bathroom, don't you? And then all at
yeah.
once, it's presented like Carly just walks in, and you sort of go like, I don't know what you felt, but I can remember watching that the first time and being very sort of confused.
Yeah, I was confused, but it wasn't as yeah, but it wasn't a graphic. And
No,
it is still awful. Tim on zero like Jesus Jesus Christ, but this was actually not even this was actually heartbreaking and because if you think about it look you said in the Carl you said it's like worst moment she said like like let's be let's go
yeah, and it's sort of
yeah
this innocent, sweet girl, don't you?
oh
For like the first time, she's just sort of been a name or a face, and then
yeah
they put a bit of personality to her in that moment.
yeah because I mean because before she was just a sort of in basically that kept popping up so
Yeah, she was
and
just a
she
part of the case, wasn't she? Like an investigation lead.
so she's got that I'm sure she's got that personnel and to behind and you can see that she's had off up and hanging kisses previously expelled into Shida for us. And so she's not only get so she's not only get the same opportunity as any other kid do.
Yeah, and it's a nice little moment. Like I said, I like that. Sort of the show that can be quite dark at times and can seem quite grim. It
Yeah,
can do these nice little moments.
yeah,
Oh, and Stuck, like we'll get to that. Your comment's interesting because I would say it is compassion that makes her look for Carly, but we'll get to that.
yeah. Um, so, yeah, so, uh, so, she was back into the room and she's further killed, and she's further, and she's further killed, questioned the arm, like, and she sort of, just some arts and she is outsmarting the mega and almost to of every student so both he's thinking for enemy it particularly if he didn't know
Yeah, and Kate's glaring daggers at Steve, isn't she?
yeah
She's got the same thoughts that pretty much everybody watching had at that point.
yeah
But now we have Dryden. That gets we visit Dryden again, and we sort of see the conclusion to his sort of story.
yeah because because you can kinda see him can kinda see him trying to like lose some out of it and everything like and because he said that can be your help so like So right now it's turned into, and so it's now turned in, and I've all been uh, agents interviewed us on and so you've got so he says that you've got the two and you've got the two on but you but you need to find out the extent of Newton's involvement and Newton's involvement in essentially.
Yeah, we sort of say you've got the lackeys. That's sort of what I
Yeah,
got. He said you've got the lackeys. You need the either the person behind them, or you need to
yeah,
see how much sort of both sort of things. I think he's hinting at, and you need to
yeah,
see Denton's involvement. And it's
yeah,
sort of interesting because Hastings' initial reaction is just, "Oh, you're just slinging mud," he says to him, doesn't he? But you can see
yeah,
Dryden's like, "No, there's more to this. You need to look into this." And he sort of is trusting Ted
yeah.
after his sort of hissy fit at him last episode. He's now sort of gone back to trusting Ted and he's sort of like, I know you will investigate this.
But seeing but seeing fairness over of that or you or a high ranking officer is what tried to was in that moment, of course I'm going to kick off because you know that because you know that you have high position and everything's just going to kill apps around you. They
Oh yeah,
go,
you can
what's
understand.
everything
But and that's
bad?
another interesting thing, like
Yeah,
considering how we said this last stream, like he was so sure and cocky and like I'm the big man on campus sort of attitude.
yeah,
He's completely he's gone from you can't touch me to like
yeah,
almost like begging, and it's an interesting thing to see. And Mark plays it brilliantly once again. You see a
yeah,
very different Dryden that he's sort of been. He's now been subservient almost. He's sort of accepting he's no longer the big, powerful position like the big man he was before.
yeah, but he basically wants his things speak to the prosecution and everybody involved in the court's system have a get off in the charge against him. That's why he's doing it
Oh yeah,
to save
it's
his
purely
own
out of
skin.
self-preservation.
Yeah,
But like I said, it's interesting to see him sort of fall so much almost from what he was like previously.
yeah,
So now that he gives them the lead about the train station, doesn't he?
and yeah,
About the fact that that you need to look at the cameras. If she was there, her car will pop up.
yeah, but yeah, but as well, to be kind of the uh, um, Orton,
That
Orton,
that's
because
next.
oh
First,
yeah,
you
yeah,
have the sort of the stuff with him saying, "Look at this car, this train
oh,
station,"
oh yeah,
and now we have the Dot and Nige sort of
yeah,
scene.
yeah, so yeah, so we go to the bar, so and the boat onto the park road to where ambush um um and the ambush took place and what make anything to or to and taking the over but I say that and try recruitment and take I'm an own like up off yourself.
Yeah,
But
she's sort of he's trying to make Nige add more evidence, isn't he?
yeah,
To sort of pin it on Cole.
yeah,
So he sort of says, you heard this, he said this to you. And you can sort of see I think honestly the more interesting part of the scene is Nige because he's been a bit backgroundy. You sort of could see he had a not very nice streak about him, but you never saw him as like a big personality. You just could tell he was nasty.
well, it came, yeah, but it came to uses the benefits as terminally
Oh, no, no,
because you,
that's what's interesting about him.
yeah,
He's very clever that he knows if he uses his disability, just as like when it comes to that thing of people underestimate him, and he's very much a character that relishes in being underestimated because he knows it gets him, it gives him more freedom almost. And I think it's interesting in this scene that because of that, you sort of, I think as an audience, I don't know what you feel like. I feel like the audience has underestimated him, and in this scene, you
yeah,
see that you shouldn't. He's just as clever and manipulative and sort of conniving as the rest of them. And you sort of see that in this confrontation with Dot.
so he ends up, and so he ends up smashing them in the whole box with the, with the baby,
Oh yeah,
and
because
then,
Dot tries to hit him first, doesn't he? He's
yeah, and then,
his usual tact of talking to get people on his side isn't working.
yeah,
So he goes with the old fashioned, I'm going to threaten him with violence. And that's what I mean. It's once again, it's Nige sort of using the nobody suspects the guy with a limp to be able to punch back. And that's what he does. And it's a really because I can remember at this point I really was starting to not like Dot. I didn't like him before this, but I was really starting to sort of not like this. I saw him as this like sniveling coward a little bit. So I'm not gonna lie, I don't like Nige, but it sort of made me smile a bit when Nige punched him back.
but see but see the more the cat he keeps popping up again, you can kind of see has oh, sort of why you said this office because every time the cat is up now and then the sort of ask each other as to on all this so as soon as the cat it gets mentioned.
Yeah, when it's sort of the sort of easygoing sort of personality he tries to put on, the sort of he's your mate sort of personality he tries, that does
Yeah.
slip. And I think
Mhm.
you can see the sort of desperation now because he thought he'd sort of sorted this issue. You can tell, and now he's clicking. He even says like Hastings doesn't let anything go, so I need more.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. He's relying on Nige, who if there's one thing Nigel has, it's self. It's like he will always look after himself. That's a
Yeah.
big part of his personality. So Nige is
Yeah.
sort of clicking here, like you're getting me more involved now, and it's more dangerous now for me. So he's sort of
And
like looking out for himself now, I think, in this moment.
yeah, and well, it's eventually the road that you've been like in around and Orton's own or each
Yeah.
for
Well, he
the
drives off, doesn't he? And you just think, oh, he's got his car, and you don't think much of it. But then later on, you think, oh,
yeah,
there's reason he took his car more than just getting away.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. It's a clever little sort of. He pops back up in a couple of scenes, and you go, oh, and then you go, oh, that's clever of him.
Yeah.
Because now we've got a Stephen Denton scene, which is quite important.
Oh yeah, because he's yeah, because he's a better ends up dead. Oh, and he's a better ends up dead. And dead. Washington because remember the remember having and to remember in July didn't have to there the other progress only is has access to the has access and has access and then kill the naked so each kind of changes it each thing goes back to the and goes back to the evidence of the um sort of or evidence against
Yeah, no,
the
and it's sort of it's an interesting moment for Denton's character, isn't it?
yeah.
Because I think this is sort of one of the few times you see the true Denton almost. That she's not pretending anymore. When she talks about determination, you can tell that was incredibly hard for her. And she sort of says like it's at the end. I think the lines are something to the effect of, "I was going to bring something new and wonderful into this house," and you can sort of tell she really wanted to keep the baby more because it wasn't just a Dryden thing. She wanted, that's the vibe I get, that she really wanted the baby, and she had to do it because he turned around and said, "I'm not going to leave my wife." And I think, and this is why I said Sudoku's comment was interesting, and this is what I got from it. I think her having to let that baby go and do the termination is why she had such a reaction to Carly. I think it was almost, and she sort of says, I think there's a line she says which gives me this hint about sort of, she refers to her as like a child, and her age is brought up quite a few times. And I think it's almost that longing she had for her own child is what actually compelled her. It maybe started off to get back at Dryden, but I think her sort of feelings on losing the baby almost transferred a bit onto Carly because she saw this very young, this innocent girl, and it brought it all that sort of that moment back to her of having to let her own baby go. So that's why I would argue it actually was compassion. Compassion out of that grief.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but after against me after the chat, he always gets a comment, and every time we get some, and we get some, and comment, and there's stream that makes me,
well, this can get a bit dark and get bogged down. We need a laugh now and again.
Yeah, and so yeah, and yeah, so you find that how means now the insecure so you can a copy secure as a result of not being able to pay for the in stuff.
Yeah, and obviously
Yeah,
we
she's on the
at the
car.
beginning of the series we knew she was cheating, and we sort of got the vibes that things weren't good at home. And this is sort of a stark sort of, oh God, she's sleeping in a car, and it's sort of, this is almost, I think, sort of a bit of a same almost. It's funny how we see like Denton at her weakest, almost with Steve in that, with the conversation she has. And then I think this is probably one of the lowest we've seen Kate.
But to be fair though, with that Connor's a character kind of need to be kind of brought back in because she has a bit of a eek to kind of to kind of
She's quick to criticise others, isn't she?
yeah
So
to kind of criticize others when she's and she's not setting an example when she's eating it.
yeah, it's that whole be careful in glass houses sort of thing, isn't it? So, but we do see what you were referring to. Nige brings Dot's car back, and they have another like meeting, don't they, in the car park?
Yeah.
And that's when Nige basically says, "I've got leverage on you now because I've looked at your burner phone." And like Dot tries to palm it off as, "Oh, that was in the past."
Yeah, I mean, I do have to agree with my accusers on all of this stuff about with her marriage and stuff. I thought like that, sorry to interrupt, just all of this stuff about her marriage kind of just use and show on, and it points with not really much an explanation background or context. I get agree with Matthew's comments.
Yeah, I think maybe I think the problem is this is one of the few times when Jed almost expected the audience to fill in too many blanks because it's hinted at, oh, it's because she's undercover, so she's not home a lot, and the husband got fed up of that. But it's never really properly explored. It's sort of just, I think, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if you almost, like you, thought she needs a humbling moment, but he didn't plan enough as to how to give it to her. He just wanted to sort of have her at that point, but didn't put enough groundwork to put her at that point. Whereas like when Steve has his lows, it's very well sort of telegraphed and explored almost, isn't it?
Yeah. But we kind of agree with Matthew. It kind of need a bit more an extra, almost a bit more explanation. Yeah, because it does feel kind of
Yeah, like I said,
dinner.
I've got a feeling this was them almost like we always say, like, don't treat your audience like idiots.
Yeah.
But I think maybe he gave a little bit too less, and he should have given a bit more, Jed, in this situation.
Yeah.
Because now you do have the sort of to add to the sleeping in the car. Then Steve gets a phone call, doesn't he, in relation to this?
Oh yeah. So um, so he's been in Sherlock to get round to its old house because I'm calling it old house because she's basically been out a house
Yeah,
because
she's been kicked out. She's been kicked out without
yeah
being told, basically.
yeah yeah because of her husband's already found out about you and left this
I never
house.
said, and that's another thing. Maybe that needed to be said as well. Like
Yeah,
even if it's just a text message you saw, like on a phone or something, saying,
and
"I know what you've done."
but it's why and the reason why I want to find out a bit more about her Ari just 'cause it's kind of sort of unexpected and the sort of troubles between those two eras at least in some Ari just you kind of already got or some sort of edge comes with
Yeah,
each had till we have
yeah.
have
But
any and then
I do
yeah.
love this scene for what it says about Steve almost
Mhm.
because, and like I said, this is what a thing I do love about this episode. You're seeing sort of, and I know some people in the chat have watched a bit forward, so obviously without spoilers, you'll probably, if you want to comment, but don't spoil. But the show works because of Steve and Kate. If you
Yeah.
don't have that relationship or that friendship or whatever term you want to use, this show doesn't work. And I think the fact that he
Yeah.
comes at this moment when she's like I can't speak, when she's like at her lowest, when she's like being kicked out of her own house, she's made a scene, hasn't she? There's police there, so he's sort of there to sort of say, right, calm down, like I'll look after you. And
Yeah.
it's, I think it's a lovely moment for Steve to sort of say, for all his faults, like we've said about women, and he can be cocky at times and he can be a bit full of himself. I think this shows that deep down he's a very decent bloke and he will be
Yeah,
there for his mates.
I mean, but he's still sort of underestimates him a bit. Like, she seems to think that he's getting a bit too close. We're in the same union areas, because he's exposed, meaning that he's now of her because she um kind of made an ass of her.
Yeah, no,
So
it's some lovely bits of dialogue. Like I said, there's some lovely
yeah,
of that. She sort of says, "Oh, I messed up my undercover, and now you're like going off like she." I think she uses a different word, but I won't say it. Like you're flirting or being with Denton,
yeah,
and she is sort of having a go at him, isn't she, at that moment? And
yeah,
Steve has a really good like comeback line that he basically says, "No, my undercover worked because she underestimated me like you do."
yeah,
And it's a brilliant little zinger he has because then you can see her face sort of go, "Oh, now it makes sense." And he's sort of saying like because people don't, and I think this was a really good idea to have Steve do this because it's showing once again another skill because he's sort of even in series one he sort of referred to himself as the blunt instrument, didn't he? He was sort of seen as the
yeah.
bull in the china shop, the one who would go forward without thinking.
It's still kind of makes a couple of the mistakes in a series, but he's more sort of a different officer as compared to the as compared to the Austin series.
Yeah, that's what I mean. This is a nice bit of showing he's developing, he's getting better at AC-12 work,
Yeah,
and that he's sort of showing that he can be. He doesn't have to just be sort of the one like running in or sort of marching in and making a sort of a show of himself. He can be just as sort of underhand as Kate can be. Yeah, that's a nice scene.
yeah, and the reason why I'm laughing is I had to do the exact same. What's his name? Matthew, my God, I'm surprised to him after
Are you two
we
not
have.
brothers secretly?
I'm
Are we sure about
surprised.
this?
I'm surprised to him after we haven't cancelled yet. Can you imagine if I got him? And can you imagine if I get Matthew? on this channel.
Oh,
The
I would have to so much be like the moderator on stream for you guys.
yeah,
Yeah, but even that's a nice little cheeky line, isn't it? When
yeah,
she's like, you can tell he said you can stay at mine. He's let her have a shower. She's washing her clothes like in his dryer,
mhm,
and it's like, and he sort of says, right, because no, to be fair, I didn't write this down in my notes. This is when Steve also says when she's like waiting, isn't she? He says, I
yeah,
think she's guilty. That's why I sort of volunteered to do the undercover because I thought there was something dodgy about her. So you can see Steve is very much in doubt.
yeah. I'm sure I'm sure the next scene, I'm sure the next scene go back the off street, which is where I'm, which is in east and or I can you go to the chief superintendent you can I and the and him like saying was the who was the duty sergeant on that night that took the all and did show any interest prior to the um um prior to get having the a position and listen to lessons here in it and like he says he couldn't all any interest.
Yeah, and this is when another character that was sort of in the first like episode, wasn't he? And then he sort of
Yeah,
disappeared
that
for a good chunk of the series, comes
and
back
yeah,
into the sort of interest.
yeah, on you the deputy sergeant it's called and a case question then I get other and evidence only I hear looking at evidence and so on when you you or then that's where and 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 and, and that's where they find out all the information from the flashback. But before that is well, you find out on you've got a gun. Oh, and then action, so he's been using his computer to look up scam power insights as well when he
Yeah, and it's
found that
that
and
is
yet
it
and
who
yet
dobbed him hit in, who got him in trouble for that.
yeah it's and you find that out in the flashbacks.
So it's sort of when you originally thought he sort of didn't like her because of the ambush, you go, no, actually there was a history there. There was a reason he reacted that badly when the ambush happened to her.
Yeah,
So this is now when Kate takes Denton, doesn't she, to the train station
yeah,
to sort of
and
see
yeah,
what she says almost.
and she doesn't really say anything, but confused for flashbacks again, and she's very uptight in that area. She's very persistent about wanting about wanting to go back home, and and she's not providing any information to the question she's been asked.
Yeah, and
about Carl.
like
Who's
considering how
a
much she wanted to find Carly, this is when also you start to go, like, why are you now being silent? Like, what is it that you've seen or what's got to you?
Yeah.
Almost you start to think, don't you?
Mhm.
And this is when you sort of, now you have a good, is it 10 minutes of just going backwards now in time almost to that night and a lot of
Yeah.
things that happened previously.
Yeah. And yeah, because I suppose I related to it. Because I suppose I did the with flashbacks that happened once before this particular episode. So everything you see from so everything you see from on prior about the um about the East function and you see and Eastern Coal, you see Japan um is already there when shifts as a waitress and you get who's essentially is walking and I
Yeah, and like you sort of see, this is from her perspective almost, isn't it, that night?
yeah,
So you sort of see she's all mess, she's got the makeup on, she's got a nice dress on, and she is watching Dryden,
yeah,
and she sees him like blatantly flirting with this girl.
yeah,
And that's when also it explains the little scene, the what we said was like a ghost of Carly. Now
yeah,
you see why that happened, because she went to the
yeah,
toilets and she did actually meet Carly in there, and Carly did say to her, "That's a nice necklace."
yeah,
So you go, "Oh, she was remembering." It wasn't like a weird like ghost or hallucination. It was a
yeah,
memory that just triggered.
yeah. So yeah, and yeah, so Carl he was off from July into the well, that canoe was almost and the black canoe was almost coming to the Russian Western extends in that war Jedi. And as you said, then I stand tell you chuck and I did that. And
But that's
I
interesting, isn't it? Because it's played in that episode that he stopped because he realised. He even says like, "I realised it wasn't right." But
yeah,
you actually see he only stopped because of he saw Dryden.
yeah,
So it wasn't his like moral conscience suddenly kicked in, like we were led to believe. He just freaked out because he saw like his ex stalking him almost, and saw that she was watching this happen with this girl.
and you get and you
Say
get
that he sort of once again when you sort of think, oh, he's probably not as bad as he's painted as Dryden. You think no, he is, because he probably would have carried on with Carly.
yeah, yeah, and you get the calm army managed who went to the car park and ate army essential resources that the car will I did the jail and still I often started eating the shit out of it and I'm basically pensioners and
Yeah, and you can
stuff
see like
like
that affect
to get
that
off it.
yeah, and that affects Denton. The fact that
Mhm.
she sees this girl, like you said, get beat up, and sort of he even like says to because Manish is there, even when she runs off, she manages to like get a lucky hit in or something, doesn't she? And she runs.
Yeah.
And even the way he talks to Manishi sort of says, "Get her and like bring her back to me."
Yeah.
So you start to think, "Oh God, like what happened to her?" Because we now know that body's not her that we found earlier in the series.
And yeah, so then next for Ashbarters she recognizes the she recognizes the um his car, so making and and so the and she questions and she asks a shirka and it's and then it's Campbell and assault investigation and it, I'm sure that so she's a so she's a so she's essentially I own this I'm about the association she has a eight of
Yeah, and that's sort of so. This is when the sort of the thing that she has prevailed with through all the series, isn't it? That she didn't know Acres, like she was now you it's being shown blatantly she talked with Acres, and then the next scene that they have together, which completely sort of, if you had any doubts before this scene that Denton was innocent, they sort of get shattered with the next scene and what happens.
the because essentially each I from a Oscars in because because in because it was all around and and all around in the house and the basic girl he said so the right we need to suppose a army. Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting because it goes back to immunity, doesn't it? Because she
yeah,
sort of says like he's not changed. He's still the criminal he was before. He's still doing all the horrible like murdering and can't remember the list. She names off like a load of things he's doing. But she says the problem is before he didn't have immunity. Now he's got immunity. He's got added protection. So he's just taking advantage of that. And it's basically what Dryden said in that press conference, that there are people who are ex-cons who are using the system, the immunity system, to give themselves protection when they're not changing their ways at all.
yeah.
So once again, it's that interesting thing of Dryden was right. He was actually right with that argument because Tommy was flaunting the rules. So it's that interesting
And
of God. You probably don't like Dryden, or you're not supposed to. But he actually was talking sense, and he actually had a point, which I think is interesting.
and yes, so after and about a convention, she accepts it, but right, so in like in the end, you find out that Orton's also involved in the whole setup as well. Okay, so when she goes back to the argue, you see the Orton's and
Well,
the
like Manish told us, which is why I said it's a small scene, but there's a lot in it. He says, didn't he? Other
yeah,
parties wanted Tommy out the picture, and I think he was
yeah,
referring to Dot
yeah,
because he was sort of, if you think about Dot's position, he
yeah,
was the underling to Tommy. Tommy
yeah,
sort of made him what he is, and because of Dot's personality, there was always going to come a time when Tommy was no longer useful and was more of a liability to Dot. And that's what, personally, that's my reading of it, why he wanted Tommy off the board, so to speak.
So then, and then push and what happens basically is for like the sword and you see is and the track
Well,
and
before that, which is interesting, she does go off route, doesn't she?
yeah, so that go
Because even Tommy, there's a scene about she's in front, and all the police people that look like they're involved almost, it hints at, and Akers and Tommy sort of go, what's she doing? So to me, that's saying she does go off route of the planned ambush a little bit.
yeah.
So then, like we said, it replays that scene again, the crash with the burning.
Yeah.
But you said now the tracker comes into it.
And yeah, so she kind of moves the track off and exit on the car to make it look as what was and make it look as though it was weak. Also, look the bad eye. So
Yeah, because she basically realizes, doesn't she,
yeah,
that it's all going to lead back to her at a point if that
yeah,
track is found on her car.
yeah.
So this is how also when Kate in the interview sort of said, like, how on earth did you get that tracker on the burning vehicle? This is how we found out she did in this scene as well.
Yeah.
Because she even like joked, didn't she, in that, Kate? Like, well, I'd need a long sort of, I can't remember the wording, but basically like a long sort of stick-ish to get it there, and nothing was found on the scene. And we learned why, because she used a twig, like a very long branch, which as soon as she put it in the fire, it burnt. So that was her evidence being burnt away.
Yeah. So and so soon as she so soon as she gets back at home, she's asked by Arnold to come up to the bed to them and you see and you see the overnight bag that had been left at the home and it's still and the minutes got the cash and I to the dictionary was offered and 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 it is essential. Yeah,
Yeah, because they know they need something more concrete, don't they? To
and
sort
yeah,
of get her at court, because up to this
and
point
yeah,
it's all circumstantial.
so she basically gets a life sentence and I just gets a sore up on the wrist, but the basically resigns from the position or can retire the next year with a full pension and then
Well, there's two scenes because you're skipping to when they do the, like, here's what happened with all the characters.
yeah.
Dot gets there's an interesting scene with Dot because Hastings basically says you
Oh
can do
yeah,
well.
because he gets kept on basically.
So basically, there's your little cliffhanger for next series, folks.
Yeah,
Dot is going to be part of AC-12 next series,
yeah.
which is very interesting. That's all I'll say because Daniel's not watched beyond the first episode. And
Oh,
another, and another,
Jesus, the first one. So yeah, we'll get to that next. But I'm not looking forward to going back through that episode.
You might like it
Yeah,
more second time. And
it's,
another fun little scene, which is what I like because it's Kate and Steve again, sort of friendship. Sort of they're at the bar and Steve's sort of on and off girlfriend appears, doesn't she?
yeah,
And Kate even says like, "Oh, go, like I'm okay." But then he chooses Kate. He stays and has a drink with her, which I think's that nice little rounding off of the previous scene of him going to her when she'd been locked out the house. It's sort of a
yeah,
nice little stopper to say like these two are the best of mates almost now.
and as I've said, all the cat and as a basic like said, what happened to the rest of the characters and stuff. I feel like that, and we still don't know where Carl, yeah,
Well,
so
we
yes,
see her, don't we?
yeah,
She's sort of
yeah, yeah,
by a
and,
ferry.
and yes, she gets off a ferry, but none of the other characters know where she is. It's only the audience that has an
Yeah.
idea, an episode just an issue. So, guys, what did you make with that episode? Yeah, I think your was on next time out. It's a dread it first episode of the next
Basically, folks,
series.
if you've missed Ranting Daniel, you're gonna get it full force next week. We see
Well,
trying to be more positive.
well, I kind of like and we kind of like a couple what aspects of the next episode, but apart from that, no, it's
All I'll
just
say, folks,
looking
there's
to
a
look
certain actor that I think Daniel, whatever this actor's in, absolutely hates him. So
oh,
that'd be fun.
oh Jesus, I had to bring that up. So yeah, it's the actual gives it 10 out of 10. I'd probably have to I'd probably have to get leave after that as the 10 out of 10 for me. Yes, well, said the apple and all would you give 9 out of 10 who else is still to give the
I think
score
Matthew, and
yeah and
well,
yeah
do
I
you want
did
to say why you think it's 10 out of 10? And the other
and
pop up, Scott.
and and because it kind of sets up the next because it kind of sets up this series and perfectly it kind of sets up the next series perfectly and go and ties everything up perfectly from the series like and it probably also because you get a lot actual stuff and then next episode it's kind of and it's kind of it's like I'm gonna have to go but I thought to see Matthew's comment because he's written a book
Yeah,
so what about if it's
I can read it out if you can't find it.
yeah
Right, so I say that, let me get the chat up. So 8 out of 10 would have been 10 out of 10 without the confusing flashbacks,
yeah
which is fair because it's like I said, it's like 10 minutes worth easy, isn't it? Of
yeah
flashbacks.
yeah because and because the first time that I actually saw this episode I'll admit Regina June, the first time I watched it, I thought, right, this is a bit jarring and with full of aspects because it was a bit over with so much of commonality and there's a full aspect right now. I don't love all of it.
Yeah,
So
so
yeah,
I think it's one, and this is why Line of Duty is. A lot of people say, "Oh, you need to watch a show like a few times or episodes a few times," and I
yeah,
also think that's a bit lazy. But Line of Duty is one of those few shows that it actually does benefit from watching episodes multiple times because you do see. Look at Daniel's face; he's dreading it.
Jesus Christ. Yeah,
So
the
don't
bit is coming.
without spoiling, you've watched season 3. He's going to enjoy bits of it, isn't he? Or at least I think he's going to enjoy it by the end, without spoilers.
Honest, um, and honestly, because I have seen the first episode of the extended series, the first episode, like, as I actually bitterly disappointing.
I can tell that also because usually by this point he's watched like 2 episodes in front of what we stream, and he hasn't done that this time. So I know that first episode really hasn't gelled with him.
Yeah, it's annoying to me. Yeah, that's a bit, so, yeah, certain actor, which I once, are you, as a moment,
Don't worry,
what
folks.
you
It's not Jodie Whittaker; it's somebody else.
yeah, and yeah, want you guys to get the whole, and the whole sort of experience of me having a night about this episode. Debate so shall just before the any shop whose channels are you appearing on and this week before you watch some movie after the first episode the series is
Told you
the
I'd get you back last night. I told you on Joker's stream.
yeah
This is me having fun. So, as I just referenced, yes, on Monday, sorry, my days have gone. I was on the Dutch Doctor Who channel with Joker, who was in the chat, and we did like a talk about each Doctor very quickly. Sort of personality of the Doctor was the theme. So if you want to have like a nice discussion stream about who, that's what we did on Monday. And then on Thursdays, I generally, unless I can't make it, I'm on Dan's channel, the Facebook. So that's Type 40 Live. And also the lovely Wendy, who's in our chat, has been on his channel the last couple of weeks talking old like Christopher Eccleston. So if you want to catch a bit of Wendy on screen, watch Dan's streams for that. And then at the end of the month, I'm also on Script Doctors, where we'll be doing the Age of Steel 2-parter, and I've got a few parts there. So, you want to have a bit of giggle? Check that out at the end of the month.
yeah and then they kind of think because that's an underrated and reporter. I mean, it's not like extraordinary, but it's gets me good. It's often in the episode, and yeah, Matthew says he's eagerly looking forward to, and
Oh, you missed Wendy. She said she's really intrigued now to watch the first episode of season 3.
uh,
Oh, folks, that stream's going to be so much fun whenever we do it next week.
honestly, are all evil people material of the evil that's
You're the one who like what wants to watch things like more like 3 times, knowing you.
I have to do it for, I have, I have to do it for research purposes for the show.
Oh, Wendy's watching it tonight now. The episode.
Maybe not tonight. I have to build myself up
No, no,
to
no,
that.
no, no. Wendy. She says she's totally watching it tonight now.
Oh, yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if the chat has a different consensus to
It will
us
be
in the
actually because
panel.
because I don't hate it as much as you. So we'll see what the chat's like.
That's because it's an abomination. But yeah, in terms of myself, we've got the next interview at some point next week, whenever that'll be all using all on Facebook or on the or instead I'll have a chat to I'll have a chat to Charlotte as we go off air. Thanks for everybody that popped into the chat and gave us scores and if that's sort of cheeky comment about mama. I said, help having to myself up the food. I said, episode I cancelled you all.
No, no,
Okay.
you can't cancel people. You're white male. It's not allowed.
Yeah. So yeah. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the bell. And share it around if you if you fancy it. But without further ado, here's the channel. And here's the channel today. And I'll see you at some point. I'll see you at some point in the next week for the and on the last.
Have fun, everybody, and we will next week. Have a good one.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, but the cherry Taylor didn't actually play that time in my I am too much with so
Okay, we'll just say goodnight. We saw it. We'll get you. We've got all this nice new tech, folks. We're getting used to it.
yeah, okay. See you soon.